In the world about us today, there are about 500,000 species of animals. Most of these were domesticated by man before history began.
It took thousands of years to tame them, but these animals returned to their wild ways in a hot minute. This is the other side of domestication. These are the feral animals. Hi, I'm Danielle Dufault, and you're watching Animalogic's Second Nature. We've talked before on the channel about the domestication of animals, but what happens when domesticated animals rewild themselves? There are about 50 species of animals that have been domesticated by humans. To be successfully domesticated, animals need to have 6 characteristics. They need a diverse appetite, but doesn't overlap too much with human food. They need to grow and mature quickly to make it worth it for humans to invest the time and effort to raise them. They have to be willing to breed in captivity and be docile enough to handle. And they need to be social creatures, and ones that don't get too scared by their human captors. Feral animals, on the other hand, are previously domesticated creatures that have escaped captivity and have the ability to survive without human care. If you live in a city, you're no stranger to the feral pigeons all around you that are descended from domesticated rock doves. You'll also know that these scrappy birds don't need a lick of human care to thrive. Except all of our garbage. But that's really stretching the definition of the word care. OG Animalogic fans will remember that our second episode ever was on pigeons. It was actually our first episode, but they aired out of order. That's neither here nor there. I love pigeons, and thankfully the rest of the world might soon be catching up.
Pigeons, love or hate them?
Hate them.
A scourge on the city.
Get rid of them. They're a nuisance. Look at all the crap on the ground.
They're really dumb.
They're really ugly.
Well, maybe not, but I love pigeons, and so do my friends Lucas and Laura from No Brainers, who I'm super excited to introduce you to. They just released an episode on the tragic origin story of the pigeon, and they take to the streets to seek justice for this once important animal. And Lucas becomes a foster dad to a baby pigeon called Cinnamon.
Oh my god, which one?
The video's hilarious and informative. You're gonna love it.
Do you mind if I ask you a few questions about pigeons?
Please go subscribe to their channel and watch their video on pigeons by clicking the link here, or by following the link in the description and leave a comment saying I sent you. And while you're there, check out all the other awesome videos on their channel. No Brainers is a group of non-experts that tackle all sorts of questions, from engineering to biology and psychology. They're very funny and full of curiosity and energy. If you like Animalogic, you're going to love No Brainers. Don't forget to click the link in the description and subscribe to their channel. They'll appreciate the support. But now, back to more animals that have rewilded themselves. The word feral itself comes from the Latin fera, meaning wild beast. But feral now means anything that can be domesticated and has returned to the wild, including plants. Feralization is the opposite of domestication, which is the process of us humans adopting organisms through artificial selection. As you can imagine, artificial selection itself is the opposite of natural selection, which happens when organisms in the wild slowly adapt to their environment to survive. Artificial selection involves humans controlling the breeding of domesticated organisms to achieve physical, and in the case of animals, behavioral traits that are more ideal for our needs. An example of this would be selectively breeding long and low-to-the-ground doggies, like dachshunds, to assist us in hunting burrowing animals.
More power, more dogs. And now Joe is the proud owner of a 6-dog-powered sedan. Under certain conditions, the Bow Wow buggy has some pretty peppy getaway, too.
Feralization is what happens when animals return to the wild and start reproducing without human intervention. Often, these feral organisms will revert back to characteristics of their truly wild ancestors. Since feral animals often come from introduced species brought from somewhere else, when they escape domestication and return to nature, They commonly have a harsh impact on native ecosystems and have even contributed to the extinction of many endemic species. So, now that we know the background, let's delve into some of the most iconic populations of feral animals around the world. We start our wild journey with pigs, which have turned out to be extremely successful if they manage to escape back into the wild. Highly invasive super pigs, or an ecological train wreck, as they've been immortalized in the media, have started to become a huge menace in Canada and the US.
A so-called super pig invasion.
Super pigs, the hard-to-eradicate animal, may be invading the United States soon.
Wildlife managers call this animal the worst invasive large mammal on the planet.
And they've been known to eat birds and even small deer. Experts say they are smart, elusive, and dangerous.
And as you can see, these animals have no problem adapting to cold weather.
A leading researcher says we've already missed the window to eradicate the pests and warns these hogs are a real risk to national parks.
Albertans are encouraged to squeal on pigs.
It sounds like they're just letting them go crazy. They're letting them go, Maggie, hog wild.
You just can't barbecue your way out of a wild pig problem.
These hard-to-eradicate feral pigs are self-made crossbreeds of wild Eurasian boars and domesticated swine. And they've adapted the best of both those lineages. They have the tenacious survival skills of wild boars, eating whatever they find while tearing up land as they root for food. They are smart, adaptable, and furry, which is essential for surviving harsh winters without a human-made shelter. They even dig what have been dubbed pigloos into the snow to hunker down and survive the cold. In addition to these wild boar qualities, super pigs also have the hyperfertility of their domesticated counterparts. By 4 to 8 months old, female super pigs are sexually mature and breed quickly, producing up to 12 super piggies a year. Super pigs will eat anything they can get their snouts around, from crops like corn, wheat, and canola, to insects, birds, reptiles, and even small mammals. They've been known to raid farms, and when they do, they come in trotters blazing. They storm in, frightening and scattering livestock, and proceed to demolish their food. In addition to tearing up the landscape in their insatiable search for sustenance, they also spread disease to the domestic swine that they terrorize. Neither pigs nor wild hogs are native to North America. Pigs were originally brought over in the 1500s by early colonizers. Wild boars, however, have a much more recent history, being brought into Canada in the 1980s and 90s to diversify livestock and as something novel to hunt. How the turntables... Australia had a similar issue with their feral pigs. Swine were brought over hundreds of years ago with the first colonists, and now over 45% of the mainland and several islands are plagued by these formerly domesticated pigs.
We were flying along the coast when we saw 3 large feral pigs and 1 young pig being followed by a dingo. As the hunt unfolds, you can see the damage to this country caused by the digging and rooting of feral pigs.
As every farm boy knows, pigs can't swim and don't want to learn. But although they said it couldn't be done, they didn't count on pig-headed determination. And once Missy got a taste of applause, all that natural ham took over.
On the slightly more sunny side of feral pigs, there are also the swimming pigs of an uninhabited island in the Bahamas called Big Major Key. While there are many stories circulating as to how these pigs ended up on this island, no one knows for sure how it was overtaken by water-loving pigs. Their population has been estimated to be around 50 to 60 individuals, and they have become a major tourist attraction. In an interesting twist, local residents of nearby islands now feed the swimming pigs. So these domesticated pigs who went feral have now come full circle and been tamed again.
Then man discovered that the wild horses roaming the plains could be tamed.
Moving across the barnyard now, let's talk about horses. Most of what we consider to be truly wild horses are actually just feral populations. There is only one remaining wild horse species, called the taki, also known as Przewalski's horse or the Mongolian wild horse. This endangered breed of wild horse is endemic to the steppes of Central Asia, and because it was never domesticated, is infamous for being hard to handle and impossible to ride. All of today's horse breeds that we consider wild in North America and Australia are actually just feral populations. Once they go feral, they revert back to their formerly wild state, roaming in groups of 5 to 15 individuals, led by a dominant stallion and his posse of mares and their young. The push and pull of domestication versus feralization is never far below the surface for horses, though. Feral males will often try and successfully recruit domesticated females, and feral horses are often captured and return quickly to a life of domesticity. Horses began to be domesticated about 6,000 years ago, and have since had feral populations all over most of the world. From the Americas, to Europe, to Asia, Africa, and Australia. In North America, horses were first introduced in the late 1400s with the earliest colonizers. By the 1600s, herds of millions of feral horses, called mustangs from the Spanish word mesteño, meaning wild, roamed all over North America. By the 1920s, mustangs were considered pests and were slaughtered indiscriminately. It wasn't until the 1970s when protections were introduced to save their dwindling populations. The Sable Island horses of Nova Scotia, Canada, are another species that we're attempting to bring back from the brink of extinction. Brought to the tiny island in the 1700s, these feral horses are now considered a naturalized species and part of the ecosystem of the island. In fact, visitors to the island are not permitted to feed, touch, or interact with the horses, which have been protected since 1961 and must stay at least 20 meters away from them at all times.
Wouldn't it be fun to find out more about farm animals?
Other farm favorites that have also rewilded themselves are cows and goats. Feral cows and goats exist throughout the world, on almost every continent, and, like many other feral species, threaten native species with their bad behavior. In both of these cases, overgrazing and spreading disease to other livestock is a major concern. Some feral cattle populations can even be quite aggressive towards humans. We can't talk about domestic animals returning to their wild selves without discussing the world's top pets turned pests, cats and dogs. Feral cats exist pretty much throughout the world and are categorized as individuals that actively avoid human contact. If you spend time with cats, you'll understand how their innate hunting skills, which are so adorable when they're attacking a catnip-filled toy, could translate to them becoming absolute apex predators in the wild. In Australia, feral cats are the main driver for the extinction of animals, including species like the rusty numbat, the desert bandicoot, the broad-faced potoroo, and the crescent nail-tail wallaby. Feral cats also put pressure on many species of lizards, birds, and frogs. For example, cats, along with human factors like trapping and overzealous burning of grasslands, caused the extinction of the paradise parrot. Cats are not native to Australia and showed up as pets of the first colonizers. Now, their feral ancestors cover almost 100% of the continent. While cats may be one of humanity's most beloved animals, they are also considered one of the most invasive and destructive species on Earth. Feral dog populations are also destructive the world over. Feral dogs aren't to be confused with stray dogs, since feral dogs are born in the wild and have had minimal, if any, contact with humans. These dogs return to their wild roots by running in packs, hunting and scavenging, and are difficult to train or handle, becoming quite aggressive when forced into contact with people. Like other feral species, feral dogs are also prone to spread disease. The Dingos of Australia, however, are an interesting example of long-ago feralization that has actually become beneficial to native ecosystems. New studies show that these dog ancestors were brought to Australia as domestic animals, by most likely Asian seafarers around 3,500 years ago. Because they've had so much time to integrate into Australian ecosystems, dingoes actually now play a role in the preservation of native species.
We were witnessing a pretty remarkable event. A dingo at full pace hunting one of Australia's worst feral animals. To the best of our knowledge, this is an event that has never before been captured on video. It provides a pretty unique insight into the hunting behaviour of dingoes and the role of Australia's top predator. The young pig is pretty quick and evasive, and our dingo looks like an inexperienced hunter.
From the early 1800s until today, farmers have considered dingoes to be pests. But there are several ways dingoes protect endemic species. First and foremost, they kill and outcompete small predators, like feral cats and red foxes, which are both more recent invasive transplants. Dingoes also control the populations of herbivores, like kangaroos, reducing grazing pressures on grasslands. If you're starting to get the sense that Australia is riddled with feral animals, we haven't even gotten to the camels. From the 1870s to the 1920s, upwards of 20,000 camels were imported from the Arabian Peninsula, India, and Afghanistan to assist with expeditions into Australia's unforgiving outback.
At one time, nothing in science seemed so absurd as the supposition that there are people who live upside down with their feet above their heads.
The invention of motorized vehicles killed the camel industry in Australia, but the camels themselves remained and eventually became feral. Currently, there are over 1 million of these rewilded, single-humped ungulates wandering around the outback. But feral doesn't just have to mean animals. Plants too can become feral or de-domesticated. These are usually crops that have escaped cultivation and have become free-living populations. Much like the dingoes, these populations may be seen as a threat or a boon, depending on which researcher you speak to. It is frequently the case that feral crops threaten cultivated crops and can interfere with native ecosystems. In the US, for example, feral rice causes more losses to rice yields than the top 2 rice crop diseases. On the flip side, feral crops provide us with information about how these feral crops genetically evolve on their own, which has the potential to help us improve the breeding of their cultivated relatives. Perhaps like the dingo, when given a few thousand years, these feral populations of plants and animals will naturally integrate into their non-native environments. Until then, we have to live with the consequences of our actions and try our best to correct the havoc that feral populations have wreaked around the world.
This pig business was beginning to worry Johnny, and for a moment he began to wonder if he'd better change his ways.
Hey everyone, we have exciting news! We're thrilled to announce the release of Animalogic's very first book, Strange Creatures. This book dives into the most incredible animals we've ever featured on the show, with each chapter packed with my illustrations and stunning full-color images. It's a fun and engaging way to learn about the animal kingdom, and a perfect tool to spark kids' interest in science. Each chapter breaks down an animal's biology, behavior, and all the coolest facts you need to know about these fascinating creatures. Animalogic's Strange Creatures is a must-have addition to your own library, or the perfect gift for an animal lover this upcoming holiday season. Click the link in the description to check it out, and if you can, order a copy. It would mean the world. Thank you so much, and I hope that you love the book.
Lots of plants can make you vomit if you eat them, but this one can make you puke just by touching it.
The hot electric acid pain that this plant's venom delivers on contact is as bad as a bullet ant sting and can send you into blinding agony for days, weeks, months, or even years.
Why did this plant evolve to cause such intense agony? This is the gimpy.
It may look cute with its plushy, heart-shaped leaves. It may sound cute with its adorable moniker, but the dark nickname of the gimpy reveals its true character. You don't get called the suicide plant for nothing. One touch, and it may make you consider ending your life, and you wouldn't be the first.
Gimpy, otherwise known as Dendrocnide moride, is a member of Urticaceae, or the nettle family.
Being part of this prickly lineage may have you assuming that this plant isn't a fun one to tangle with. But even amongst its brethren, no plant on this planet hurts more than gimpy.
The suicide plant is, somewhat unsurprisingly, native to Australia. Specifically, it's most at home in the tropical rainforests of Queensland, though its range extends to the northern tip of New South Wales. It mostly lives in rainforest clearings, along creek lines and small tracks, basically anywhere it can soak up a little sun between the dense forest canopy.
We already know that Australia hosts some of the world's ouchiest animals.
Oh no! Here!
Come here, Bonnie.
You what?
You're not filming, are you, you big freak? Let it go, dogs, let's go. The other dog's coming. Yeah, just buzz that dog, man.
But now we can also add the most excruciating plant to that list. Anecdotal accounts say that gimpy venom is on par with bullet ant stings, a 4 on the Schmidt Pain Index, which is the highest possible pain rating for insect stings. The only difference between the two being that a bullet ant sting stops hurting after 24 hours, unlike gimpy, which can last for years. Here are several completely different Australians giving graphic descriptions of the pain of gimpy stings.
The worst kind of pain you can imagine, mate. Mate, it was like being burned with hot acid and electrocuted at the same time. The pain was almost unbearable. I couldn't walk or sleep. Mate. I've had 4 kids, 3 cesareans, 1 natural childbirth. None of them came close. The pain was beyond unbearable. The body gets to a pain threshold, and then I just start vomiting. Mate.
Creating this world of pain takes a very precise toxin delivery system. The fine fuzz that covers the leaves, stems, and berries, giving them their plush look, are actually densely packed hairs that are made of silicon and structured like a hypodermic needle. While they seem to resemble jellyfish nematocytes, they're actually nothing alike.
Each gimpy hair is filled with very potent neurotoxins, much like a spider or cone snail's venom, which arguably makes this potentially the world's only venomous plant. A gimpy's neurotoxins are appropriately named gimpytides. These neurotoxins wreak havoc on nerve tissue, which is how the gimpy gets such a huge reaction out of its victims.
And this neurotoxin has a serious shelf life. Dried specimens of gimpy that were collected more than a century ago still have the ability to cause excruciating pain.
On a wild side note, recent research has determined that gimpytides may permanently change the way nerve cells work. Unlocking how gimpytides interact with nerve cells has researchers studying them for their potential as a brand new kind of pain reliever, leading to a drug that doesn't cause dependency like opioid-based painkillers do, may just be gimpy's only redeeming quality.
All right, back to the stinging. Once contact with skin is made with these hypodermic needle hairs, the tips break off, injecting the pain juice. The hairs are tiny and basically invisible, so they are impossible to pull out individually. Often, the skin will close around the hairs, embedding them forever.
There is no antidote for a gimpy sting. The current recommended treatment is not to rub. For the love of all things good, never rub. And splash the area in diluted hydrochloric acid, which breaks down the peptide coating of the hairs. Then, apply wax strips to the area and try to rip out as many gimpy hairs as you can. You know it's bad when the treatment is pouring acid on yourself and giving yourself an emergency Brazilian.
The pain of touching gimpy is instantaneous and peaks at about 20 to 30 minutes after contact. In bad cases, your lymph nodes, which usually protect your body from infection, will be sent into hyperdrive. Within 20 minutes, your lymph nodes will swell so much they'll throb in agony for hours, making you wonder which pain is worse.
And because the hairs are made of silicon, a substance the body can't break down, they can remain in place, ready to shake loose new waves of painful neurotoxins for years after contact. but it's not just contact that will cause you trouble.
Just standing near the plant for too long can cause a bad case of painful and relentless sneezing. Keep hanging around and this will morph into a wicked nosebleed. That's because the plant is constantly shedding these toxin-filled hairs, which float invisibly around the plant like clouds of misery.
Instinctively, after a sting like this, you'd probably reach for some water to wash the area. But this is when the gimpy's sadistic side really comes out. Water on the stung area actually activates the toxins for up to years afterwards. It's the worst kind of flashback.
Despite its intensity, the pain caused by gimpy is truly unique in that it isn't representative of any actual damage, and its neurotoxins are not actually lethal. While a poisonous snake bite, for example, hurts like crazy, the venom will also cause serious damage to the body.
So although it's likely the worst pain you'll ever experience, you'll actually be totally fine. Someday. Probably.
While the stings of the gimpy are not lethal per se, the suicide plant has caused at least one rumored death. A serviceman in World War II is rumored to have killed himself after using the leaves as toilet paper. Another had to be tied to a hospital bed for 3 weeks because he went, quote, mad as a cut snake after falling into a gimpy during military training.
Even non-native animals, like dogs and horses, aren't immune to the gimpy's excruciation situation.
One of the first reports of gimpy from 1866 details a road surveyor's horse, which, quote, was stung, got mad, and died within 2 hours.
Interestingly, many native mammals, insects, and birds do not seem to be affected by the gimpy.
Some mantises and spiders make the deadly leaves of the gimpy their home, using the venomous plant to hide out from predators, similar to how clownfish have adapted to live in the highly venomous sea anemones. The caterpillar of the Jezebel butterfly, which itself is covered in spikes, can even eat the similarly spike-covered plant, as they've evolved to be immune to the gimpy's venom. Some birds have evolved to be able to eat the deadly plant's hair-covered, raspberry-like fruit, and they distribute the seeds throughout the rainforest. The holes that are often seen chewed in the leaves are from nocturnal leaf-eating beetles, along with many other leaf munchers and sapsucker insects.
But the greatest fan of this questionable snack is the most hardcore animal of them all, the red-legged pademelon.
This tiny kangaroo-like marsupial has been known to strip entire gimpys of their leaves in just one night.
Maybe the real key to unlocking the next great painkiller is to find out what superpowers the red-legged pademelon has and to replicate that. Until then, it's best to steer very clear of the gimpy.
This unassuming fungus kills more people than any other mushroom. Eat one of these and your days are numbered. But before you die, you'll first have to suffer for days, if not weeks, as your liver slowly fails and your organs give out. This is the appropriately named death cap mushroom.
Today we're talking about a super deadly fungus that's invaded almost every corner of the world. Amanita phalloides, otherwise known as death cap mushroom, is a species of highly toxic mushrooms of the Amanitaceae family. And when I say highly toxic, I mean this little not-so-fun guy is responsible for about 90% of mushroom-related deaths in the world.
The fruiting bodies of death caps go through many looks in their short autumnal lifespan. When mature, the caps can range from greenish yellow to brown, all the way to tan or sometimes white. These caps can be as small as 4 centimeters or as large as 16 centimeters and can be round or oval when young and convex or flat as they mature.
Just like humans, young death caps smell really wonderful, but get stinkier with age. Those who've eaten them and lived to tell the tale say they're actually quite delicious.
It's important to note that they are as toxic as plucky youngins as they are when they're glimmering old daddies. So regardless of their taste or odor, they will kill you the same at any stage of their maturity.
We used to believe that these unassuming mushies were native to every continent but Antarctica. Recently, however, thanks to DNA evidence and some serious botanical sleuthing, we've discovered that death caps are actually native to Europe and the British Isles.
And much like the British, they've invaded and colonized almost every other part of the world. Death caps accomplish this not of their own will, but rather as stowaways in the roots of trees like oaks, birches, and elms that were transplanted from Europe.
In other words, they were unwittingly spread around the planet by the very species they're easily capable of murdering.
Death caps are mycorrhizal, meaning that they have a symbiotic relationship with plant roots. Mycorrhizal mushrooms use their root-like mycelium to tap sugars from the roots of their host tree. But since this is a symbiotic relationship, the mushrooms also give back in the form of nutrients like phosphorus and nitrogen that they pull from the soil. These nutrients can actually make the tree more drought and disease resistant, so that's a win for the mushrooms too.
Okay, so how can a fungus that's so beneficial for one species be deadly to another?
Death caps contain 3 different types of people-killing toxins, the most deadly of the trio being an amatoxin called alpha-amanitin. This powerful toxin most notably causes liver failure, and because it's heat stable, cooking the death cap doesn't make it any less deadly.
And amanitin is seriously twisted. It doesn't start doing its worst on your system until 24 hours after ingestion. 6 to 12 hours after eating a death cap, you'll feel horribly sick to your stomach with nausea and diarrhea. After that, you might start feeling better, thinking the worst is behind you. But this honeymoon period is just the amanitin being absorbed by the lining of your intestines and making its way to your liver.
From 24 hours to 7 days after ingestion, on a molecular level, these toxins scramble the functions of liver cells, which in turn causes the liver to die. In addition to liver failure, you may also experience kidney failure, brain dysfunction, and even death. Quick treatment is essential to save your life. Act too slowly, and within a week, you might just be a goner.
The reason that death cap poisoning is so darn hard to treat is because amanitin is sticky. The patient may be given activated charcoal and IV fluids to try and counteract the effects of amanitin, but once the toxin binds to the liver cells, there's basically no going back. If the patient is stable, a liver transplant may be the only way to save their life.
A compound called salibinin can be used to head off the effects of amanitin, since it binds to the same liver receptors and prevents the amanitin from getting its hooks into the liver cells. Salibinin, however, is only effective when taken before the amanitin has had a chance to bind, which means you'd have to take it before symptoms even set in. That means you'd have to know for sure that you ate a death cap instead of a harmless edible dupe.
Mistaking a death cap mushroom for an edible look-alike is actually what leads to the majority of poisonings every year. As I mentioned, death caps can look very different depending on their stage of their life cycle, making identification hard and causing confusion with other harmless and even delicious species.
Volvariella volvaceae, or the paddy straw mushroom, which is cultivated throughout East and South Asia and is used widely in cooking, looks suspiciously like these deadly shrooms. Before their caps erupt, young death caps have a rounded appearance and can also be mistaken for edible puffball mushrooms, which are found in temperate climates around the world. Then, there are several edible mushrooms in the Agaricus genus, which contains culinary favorites like button and field mushrooms that can also be confused with young death caps.
While highly lethal, the death cap isn't the only baddie in its Amanita genus.
Amanita muscaria, otherwise known as fly agaric, fly amanita, or colloquially toadstool, is probably the most recognizable mushroom in the world. Anyone who loves the Super Mario franchise will know this red and white icon. This species is poisonous, and while it has the ability to kill, it rarely does. Unlike death caps, Amanita muscaria attacks the central nervous system, sometimes leading to coma. Luckily, this Amanita species stands out like a sore thumb, so confusing it for another fungus is pretty rare.
There are a few other extra baddie species in the Amanita genus that aren't as easily identified as a red and white speckled toadstool.
These Amanita are commonly referred to as destroying angels due to their ethereal white appearance and potent killing powers. There's Amanita virosa, a European native, Amanita bisporigera, native to eastern North America, Amanita ocreata, native to western North America, and the European Amanita verna.
All of these highly deadly fungi have a similar effect as death caps. A single mushroom topper of these destroying angels can end you.
Immature destroying angel mushrooms commonly look a lot like other species that are edible. So, like death caps, accidental poisonings have also been known to happen.
Given all that toxicity, I'm here to assure you that not all Amanitas want you dead. Some are perfectly edible and delicious.
Amanita calyptoderma, otherwise known as cocora or cocoli, looks eerily similar to death caps, but is 100% less deadly. Amanita caesarea, otherwise known as Caesar's mushrooms, are equally delectable.
Then, of course, there is Amanita vaginata, commonly known as the grisette, which is excellent for eating.
Despite the gloomy diagnosis after eating a death cap, there is hope on the horizon for ingesters of this deadly fungi. A new compound that's already been in use in the medical field, an imaging dye called indocyanine green, has been found to block the effects of alpha-amanitin.
So far, we have yet to test this compound on humans, but perhaps with more research we can prevent the estimated 100 deaths a year that death caps are responsible for.
It's a squirrel. It's a bird. It's a kite? No! It's the vegetarian night stalker of Southeast Asia. Today, we're in the primate uncanny valley. We have so much in common with these wide-eyed weirdos, but we're also so different. They glide, they have comb teeth, and they're 5 times lighter than your head. What mysteries do they hold, and what can we learn from them? This is the strangest almost primate in the world, the Colugo. Colugos are sort of the mutant love child of a tarsier and flying squirrel. Their lifestyle is pretty similar to those of other gliding mammals, who mostly eat fruits and nuts and have evolved to jump from tree to tree. For small animals like these, the air is safer than the ground, which is swarming with carnivores. Flying squirrels are possibly the most well-known gliding mammals, but this is a successful strategy that has evolved independently several times over many different orders. In marsupials, gliding has evolved, among others, in the Pitoris genus, which includes sugar gliders and mahogany gliders, and the Petoroides genus, also known as the great gliders. There are also over 50 gliding rodent species around the world, with different species of flying squirrels making up most of them. The most charismatic of these are probably the Siberian flying squirrels. They are just way too cute. They always look like they're mustering up the courage to ask another flying squirrel out on a date. But Colugos are different. There is something lemur-like to them, which initially earned them their nickname, the flying lemurs. That moniker is wrong, but not by much. DNA tests have shown that they're our closest relatives outside of primates. If you don't really see a resemblance between a Colugo and, say, a gorilla, it's because our evolutionary paths diverged during the Cretaceous, when dinosaurs were still hunting little mammals. That's a lot of time to change and adapt to new environments. There are only 2 remaining Colugo species. The Philippine Colugo lives in the southern Philippines, especially in the islands of Mindanao and Bohol. This is the biggest of the 2 species, at just about 1.5 kilograms. It has a mottled coat and a wide face. They're kinda like the pit bulls of the Colugos. And then there's the Sunda Colugos, which live in Southeast Asia, from Thailand to Indonesia. They're a little smaller, have solid brown or ginger coats, and a much more delicate little face. They're basically Colugo greyhounds. But let's stop beating around the Colugo's bushy tail. You came here to see these puppies fly. Look at them go! Colugos have a sort of built-in kite that extends from their wrists to their ankles. It's the maximum amount of coverage that you could have without growing giant wings like bats. Their squirrel suit is called the patagium, and it's made of leathery skin. On top of that, they have webbed feet that maximize the surface they have to glide. To travel between trees, they climb as high as possible and then jump. With their patagium fully outstretched, they can glide for up to 200 meters, but jumps of 20 or 30 meters are most common. As you can imagine from their shape, Colugos are not great walkers. Climbing and gliding are their 2 main methods of transportation, and falling to the ground can be deadly. Southeast Asia is teeming with predators. While on the tree canopy, Philippine eagles are the greatest threat. But on the ground, several small cat species, as well as foxes, dogs, and dholes, can easily catch a Colugo. And so, their entire evolutionary history consists of adaptations to help them traverse the forests by climbing and gliding, and doing it at night when there's no birds of prey around. Have you ever walked in a forest at night without a lamp on? It's terrifying. Colugos do that every night while jumping into the void. Their huge eyes come equipped with giant retinas that give them the night vision and depth perception needed for their leaps. Weirdly, despite being nocturnal, they're thought to have some color vision. Primate color vision evolved after we split off from colugos, but it seems the building blocks were there already, and the ability to see ripe fruit from afar evolved in both orders independently. Besides predators and gravity, the colugo's biggest problem is rough landings on trees. But wouldn't you know it, they also have adaptations to protect themselves and their babies from harsh landings. They have an inbuilt gyroscope that helps them control their speed along the X and Y axis. When they're in glide mode, they are almost perfectly horizontal, so they don't descend as quickly. But when they're about to reach their destination, they swivel themselves upwards. This slows them down on the X-axis, but makes them fall more quickly. So they have to do it at just the right time so that they don't fall to the predator-rich floor. With all the predators around, it's too dangerous to leave the babies alone in the nest, so mom takes them wherever she goes. Colugo babies are born underdeveloped, almost as underdeveloped as marsupial babies. From birth, they attach themselves to the mom's belly. The mom uses her tail to build a little pocket for the babies, making a pseudo-pouch or baby carrier. And so, moms will carry the babies for months while she's out foraging, and will slowly introduce them to solid foods. Colugos have a really well-developed digestive system, as they need to eat a lot of fiber. When available, the majority of their meals are fruit salads, with the occasional lichen dessert to get extra minerals. In times of scarcity, they chew on ants, bark, leaves, and other plant matter. Their comb-like teeth have the dual purpose of stripping away hard materials, like lichens and tough skin of some fruits, and being a pretty efficient brush to groom themselves to get rid of ticks and other parasites. Partly because of this diet, colugos are known to have a very high parasitic load in their guts. It's so bad that their feces have been reported to move around due to the sheer number of worms in it. But don't worry, we're not going to show you that. Or are we? No, we're not. Both colugo species are considered least concern due to their large range. But there is actually some concern due to the rapid deforestation of the region. Colugos live in areas that are quickly developing. There are simply fewer trees, and those that are still there are more spread apart. In some areas, roads are being built, which brings the additional danger of being run over by cars. There is a current initiative to protect colugo populations by building gliding posts, which are basically utility poles in the middle of the forest or alongside roads. Colugos can use them as platforms and shorten the distance between trees. We're still learning about colugos, and with the conservation projects in place, we're hoping we can see these little guys thrive.
A lot of the problems we face in nature can be attributed to human stupidity.
He doesn't stop to think that the fence was put up for a reason. No, Nick doesn't stop to think until it's too late.
Oh, he's pissing everywhere. Let it go, Tonks, let's go.
Get him down, Grabby. Very nice job by Grabby.
And these introduced species are no exception, whether they spread by lack of foresight, by carelessness, or by sheer blunder. These species are now a big problem for us and their non-native habitats.
But friend or foe, we must face one phenomenal fact: their fantastic power to multiply.
These are the world's most invasive species. We've covered a lot of highly invasive feral species before, but today we're talking about animals that didn't spread as a result of domestication. Like ferals, these animals and plants were introduced by people to new environments and managed to completely hijack their new ecosystems. An invasive species can be defined as one that is not native to a particular area, but was introduced, and as a result, has caused great environmental or economic harm.
They do have the potential to crowd us off the earth altogether.
Invasive species tend to adapt easily to their new environment, reproduce quickly, and outcompete native species. They can be introduced either as sneaky stowaways, by accident, or on purpose by humans. Let's first take a look at the stowaways. If you've swam in the Great Lakes region of North America, you, or at least your feet, are well familiar with the plague that is the zebra mussel. These foot slicers are native to the Black and Caspian Seas and showed up in North America, attached to the hulls of ships in the late 80s. These ships traveled from the zebra mussel's native home in Eurasia and inadvertently introduced this invasive villain to North America. Zebra mussels are now so prevalent that they threaten native species in the Great Lakes and connected waterways as far-flung as Nevada, California, and Texas. Everything is big in Texas, including zebra mussel populations. Not only do they filter out all the algae that other species need to survive, they will attach and choke out any native mussel species and smother fish spawning grounds. In North America, they have few natural predators, and an environmentally safe way to eradicate them has yet to be discovered, as flamethrowers don't work too well underwater.
Quarantine measures include the thorough inspection and fumigation of incoming ships in order to destroy insect hitchhikers.
The Asian longhorn beetle was another stowaway on shipments destined for Canada in the 1990s. Infested wood that had been used as packaging material for cargo made its way to North America, and the beetles found their way to the endemic hardwood trees. A female beetle can lay up to 100 eggs in shallow holes, which it burrows into the bark of maple, poplar, birch, and willow trees. The tunnels they create cut through water and nutrient pathways within the tree, eventually killing the host. Asian longhorn beetles have had a devastating impact on maple trees across the country. After decades of destruction by these beetles, a campaign by the cities of Toronto and Mississauga successfully eradicated the beetles in the region during the summer of 2020. Perhaps the most infamous and destructive stowaways of them all are the brown and black rats, which are generally considered two of the world's most invasive species.
We know that rats are very prolific. They are the most prolific of all mammals. A single pair of rats left to reproduce unhampered would become 1,500 in a year.
Brown and black rats have spread all over the world from Asia as long as seafaring has been a thing, and they thrive wherever humans live. Their high birth rate ensures that populations explode wherever they land, and their omnivorous diet sees them decimating everything from birds, small mammals, invertebrates, plants, and fodder for livestock. Dealing with the rat problem is a toughie, so there are only a few places on Earth that have done it successfully.
And I'll need more men to kill the rats. We want you to hire a crowd. You'll do good work if you hang out this sign that means no rats allowed.
The province of Alberta in Canada is the largest area in the world that is rat-free, thanks to aggressive programs to prevent their invasion. It also helps that they aren't directly connected to any ocean. When they were first discovered moving into Alberta from the east in 1950, laws were introduced that made it the personal responsibility of each person and municipality to prevent the spread of rats. A 600-kilometer-long and 29-kilometer-wide strip of land on the border with Saskatchewan was designated the Rat Control Zone. Pest control inspectors were hired to patrol the zone and sniff out any rats. They threw arsenic and other poisons under every permanent building, sometimes to the detriment of livestock and pets. They even burned infested buildings to the ground. Public education about rats was also a top priority, especially because most Albertans had never even seen a rat before and had no idea what to look for. To this day, it's still illegal to own rats as pets in the province. The efforts to keep rats out has saved the province of Alberta an estimated $1 billion in property damage, livestock loss, human suffering, and healthcare costs. On the other side of the globe, Australia has not been so successful with their invasive stowaways. Northern Pacific sea stars, which are native to, well, the Northern Pacific, inadvertently became one of the 10 most invasive marine species in Australia. They arrived to Australian seas as larval stowaways in the ballasts of transport ships traveling from Asia. Leaving behind their natural competitors, predators, and parasites, they had free rein in Australian waters to start destroying natural habitats with their voracious appetites for anything they can wrap their arms around. And when Northern Pacific sea stars have eaten absolutely everything in sight, they will even turn on their own kind and cannibalize their brethren. While invasive stowaways hitch rides on human-made vessels, many invasive species end up taking over new habitats thanks to sheer human folly. The sea lamprey, a parasitic and truly horrifying fish native to the Atlantic Ocean, managed to make its way up the St. Lawrence River and into Lake Ontario, which has the lowest elevation of the Great Lakes chain at just 74 meters above sea level. These eel-like nightmares have a disc-shaped mouth ringed with sharp teeth surrounding a razor-sharp, rasping tongue, perfect for latching onto their fishy victims. While Lake Ontario was already infested due to its proximity to the St. Lawrence River, Niagara Falls served as the perfect natural barrier to prevent sea lampreys from moving further upstream into other Great Lakes. Improvements to the Welland Canal, which bypasses Niagara Falls, allowed these slippery parasites to get through and access the rest of the Great Lakes, where they have been wreaking havoc ever since. Nutria, also known as koipu, a large and semi-aquatic rodent native to South America, was brought to the US in the late 1800s to be farmed for fur and meat. When interest in eating oversized rodents declined in the 1940s, nutria were introduced both accidentally and intentionally into local habitats from Washington state to Florida. Since then, they have been decimating wetland plants and thereby causing mass erosion wherever they set up shop. Their burrowing habits further threaten wetlands, as well as human infrastructure like bridges, culverts, and roadways. And to top it all off, they are hotbeds of parasitic activity. The roundworms they carry contaminate water supplies, which can cause something called nutria itch, which is probably as horrible as it sounds. But when it comes to human air creating invasive species, the state of Florida prevails as the most blunderous.
This is the story of a visit to a land that knows no winter, the land where the sun reigns.
Human air is the reason green iguanas have taken over Florida, displacing native wildlife. These lizards that are native to Central and South America were inadvertently released into the wild in the 1960s, when these exotic pets got too large for their owners. These lizards can reach upwards of 2 meters long, and have cast a dark gloom over the Sunshine State ever since.
You got a runner.
Once they hit 60 centimeters, they basically have no natural predators in Florida. Open season was declared on green iguanas, and they can legally be hunted indiscriminately to keep their numbers down.
Oh. Grabby got him. Get him down, Grabby. Very nice job by Grabby. Another one out of the ecosystem.
Despite Florida's balmy temperatures, iguanas don't do well there. And in the winter, the temperatures drop low enough that the iguanas will freeze to death. Much like green iguanas, Burmese pythons have overtaken the Florida Everglades due to lack of natural predators.
No, my hands are like greasy. My hands are greasy. His intestines are always.
Oh, he's pissing everywhere.
Oh my god.
Nice job, Mom. You're freaking natural.
These 5-meter-long snakes also have a similar origin story. They were brought to the state as exotic pets and released into the wild by irresponsible owners. It didn't help that in 1992, Hurricane Andrew destroyed a python breeding facility, releasing these snakes into the nearby swamps. And ever since, they have devastated endemic animal populations, their clashes with alligators being the most terrifying and troubling, as their bouts often result in the death of both animals. Marsh and cottontail rabbits, as well as foxes, are effectively gone, and opossum, raccoon, and bobcat populations have almost completely disappeared. Next in line to take over the Everglades seems to be the Nile crocodile. This African species, that kills 200 people a year in their native habitat, has been showing up in Florida too. As usual, exotic pet owners are likely to blame for the unexpected appearance of another crocodilian in Floridian swamps.
The sport of wrestling finds its way into the Everglades. Tommy Clark is carrying his opponent with him. Whether you can see him or not, he's there.
Let me at him.
But it's not just exotic reptiles that have taken over Florida. This state also has a primate problem. And no, I'm not talking about humans. Well, them too. Rhesus macaques, which are native to Asia, from China to Afghanistan, have been monkeying around in Florida since the 1930s and 40s. It was at this time that the owner of a glass-bottomed boat company released a dozen of these monkeys in the Silver Springs Park area to boost his business. Their population soon ballooned to the hundreds and saw them destroying vegetation and even increasing levels of E. coli in the surrounding water. Yuck. Perhaps the most famous of all the exotic pets turned invasive species are the so-called cocaine hippos of Colombia. These hippos were imported and released into a zoo in Colombia by Pablo Escobar in the 1980s. What he didn't realize was that his zoo was connected to a larger river system, and soon the hippos escaped and began to reproduce. You can check out that wild story in the full episode here. Now, let's talk about the ill-advised species that were released on purpose by humans with little or no foresight into how that would actually turn out.
Many of our enemies multiply disproportionately when we disturb the natural balance in order to advance our civilization.
Many of these species were introduced as pest control and then got out of hand themselves. An example of this would be cane toads that were brought to Australia in the 1930s to manage populations of beetles that were attacking sugarcane crops. And eat the beetles they did, along with a whole lot of other native insects, other frogs, and even bird eggs. Being poisonous ensures that they have no natural predators to keep their populations in check.
We have destroyed the natural habitats of the predatory animals who might prey on the invaders.
Coconut palms are another non-native invader of Australian shorelines. These trees push out native vegetation and don't offer the same protection that tangled rainforest trees do during storms. Their tall trunks also leave the ground below exposed to erosion. Kudzu, a creeping vine that chokes out the plants it overtakes, was gifted by Japan to the United States at the 1876 Centennial Exposition in Philadelphia. Since then, it's been known as the vine that ate the South for reasons that become apparent the second you see it. Another misguided attempt at dealing with an invasive species led the islands of Hawaii to be overrun with mongoose, of all things. Introduced in the 1880s by the sugarcane industry to control the invasive rat population, mongoose do indeed gobble up many a rat. But they also unfortunately love the native insects, animals, and birds the islands have to offer, which crashed many local populations. While we often talk about all the invasive species that have overtaken Australia, there are a few Australian species that have become invasive elsewhere too. Like the brush-tailed possum, which was first introduced to New Zealand by European settlers looking for a wild source of food and fur in the 1850s. 150 years later, these bovine tuberculosis-carrying possums number in the tens of millions in New Zealand. So whether we did it by accident, through carelessness, or on poorly planned purpose, invasive species are 100% a human-created problem. We have conquered every corner of the globe, and in our wake is havoc that we can only hope to correct. Just not by throwing another animal at it.
Grabby got him. Get him down, Grabby. Very nice job by Grabby.
These strange little wild dogs live among some of the world's most dangerous predators. Monitor lizards fear them, and tigers hate them. So what makes these tiny dogs such powerful hunters? Let's take a deep dive into one of the most organized hunters in the world. This is the killer whistler, the dhole. The dhole is a strange fox-like canid that is somehow in constant struggle with tigers, leopards, monitor lizards, and bears, and has earned their respect through its smarts and grit. Dholes are about the size of an Australian shepherd, and though they look like a red fox corgi hybrid, they're actually much more closely related to wolves and jackals. They have survived humans and some of the greatest predators on Earth, partly due to their social life. Like other canids, dholes live in groups. They usually have about 10 to 15 members, though sometimes separate groups merge to make supergroups of up to 30. Because of the lack of rigid hierarchy, their groups are more commonly known as clans instead of packs. They're not really egalitarian societies because breeding females seem to be higher in the hierarchy. but they're basically hippie communes full of voracious killers. Wait, are dholes a cult? When they hunt, the clan splits into smaller units of about 5. They get ready for the chase by play fighting and running around each other. It's like athletes getting ready for the big game, but in their case, the game is deer and other large ungulates. You know, just passing around the deer skin. The meal varies depending on the location, but markhors, tapirs, chitals, and even baby elephants are on the menu. Dholes, like humans, are very visual hunters and communicate using a combination of calls and visual cues. They usually go out hunting in the morning daylight in groups of 5. That's their optimal hunting group size. Larger groups are harder to coordinate, and smaller groups can't cover as much ground. Usually, one of them will lead the charge, while the rest stay back and cover the flanks. As they chase their prey, their whistles help them keep track of each other. If they get close enough, they bite in the legs and sides and try to guide it towards water, where prey bleeds out faster and are less mobile. If prey refuses to go to water, they just keep on biting until it falls. In order to survive a dhole attack, prey has to be agile to navigate the forest, quick to outrun their hunter, who runs at 50 kilometers an hour, have the stamina to keep going while injured, and be very, very lucky. Most animals don't have this set of skills and eventually are captured. The dholes tear their prey open and quickly eat the most nutritious parts. The heart, liver, and lungs are their favorite organs. They also have to gorge themselves to return to the clan and regurgitate some of their food for the pups and the pregnant females. It seems a bit unfair not to be able to enjoy your meal after a hard day at work. But for the dholes, finding and killing their prey is only the beginning of their problems. The noise and the smell of blood brings in unwelcome guests. Tigers. In some areas, they have to share their hunting grounds with tigers, leopards, and due to their more aquatic habitats, Asian monitor lizards. The arrival of a tiger forces dholes to flee, as they're simply too big and too strong to do anything about it. Leopards can sometimes be fought off if a dhole has backup, but can be a death sentence when encountered one-on-one. Asian monitor lizards, on the other hand, generally seem pretty chill to share prey with the dhole. Except this guy. He does not seem happy. Well, maybe he's just about to puke. Bears and snow leopards can also show up in parts of their range. And of course, any of those large predators will not only steal their food, but also hunt dholes. It's a cat-eat-dog world. In some cases, a big group of dholes can steal a leopard's prey. It's just another case of kleptoparasitism, a common occurrence in the natural world. These amazing battles between dholes and big cats used to be common all over the northern hemisphere, but their numbers have shrunk so much that it's become an almost mythical occurrence. There are only about 2,000 mature dholes in the wild, about 1/10 of the global polar bear population, and yet we never hear about their plight. Tigers might steal their kills and hunt dholes, but humans are by far their worst enemy. We have outcompeted them for food, destroyed their habitat, and in some cases put bounties on their heads, like the British did in India in the early 20th century. Today, farmers will often kill dholes to preemptively protect their livestock. Since their range has been broken up so much, and they've been forced to remote areas with disparate climates, several subspecies have appeared. 7 remain today, and vary in color, fur length, and size. Smaller, darker dholes live in southern India and Southeast Asia, and lighter, fluffier ones live in China, the Himalayas, and other mountainous regions. Before humans took over, they were found all over Europe. The last European dholes died in the mountains of Italy and Spain about 10,000 years ago. To prevent that from happening to contemporary dholes, conservation biologists are working on specific plans for each country where dholes live. The plans will include protecting their habitat, raising dholes in captivity and reintroducing them in the wild, providing orphaned pups with dog foster parents, vaccinating them against disease they can acquire from domestic dogs, and launching education campaigns to improve their image in the eyes of farmers. Changing people's mentality about dholes is crucial and will be tough. They have a reputation for being ferocious and untamable, which, to be fair, is true. Dholes never become comfortable around people, will bite if approached, and are just generally very wild animals, even if raised in captivity from a young age. In China and India, there are legends about their ferocious behavior, especially their ability to stand up to larger predators and hunt huge prey. In a story in the Jungle Book verse, Mowgli's wolf family is warned of an upcoming war with the vicious dholes. This isn't even that far-fetched. Wolves and dholes kinda hate each other. But thankfully, they don't encounter each other very often. Saving the elusive dhole will take a lot of work and time, but hopefully in a few decades, their numbers will grow and we'll see them rule once again from the tropical jungle to the Himalayas.
This fungus-looking plant has no leaves or roots. It rarely pops above the surface, but when it does, its fleshy flower reeks like rotting meat. To reproduce, it imprisons its pollinators like a Venus flytrap before releasing them unharmed back into the wild. This plant has been dubbed the strangest plant in the world, but it might just be the most misunderstood. This is Hydnora.
If you want to see these elusive weirdies, you'll have to look very long and hard in semi-arid regions of Madagascar, Africa, and the Arabian Peninsula. Currently, we only know of 8 species, but that number is probably due to the fact that they rarely appear above the surface, and when they do, it's in remote locations.
2 Hydnora species were discovered for the first time in recent years, but only because they were found in markets in South Africa and Mozambique being sold as traditional medicine. So what makes this plant so weird? Well, first of all, just take one look at it.
Hydnora doesn't look so much like a plant, but more like some claymation monster from a 1950s horror movie. They look so alien and unplant-like that they are often mistaken for fungi.
The next order of weirdness comes when you give it a whiff. Befittingly, this plant doesn't smell flowery like other flowering plants. Instead, it reeks of rotting flesh. More on why this stink is so important later. Adding to its rap of being an absolute weirdie, Hydnora will only very rarely and sporadically appear on the surface, and only to flower.
And when they do, they can cause significant damage, even having been known to hulk out and bust through asphalt to reach the surface.
So, if all that doesn't speak enough to their status as the world's strangest plant, let's dive a little deeper into their unusual attributes. Hydnora is one of the rare 1% of flowering plants that's parasitic. In this case, specifically, holoparasitic, meaning it gets 100% of its nutrients and carbon from its host plant.
As a result, Hydnora is one of the few in the plant kingdom that have no leaves at all. The primary function of leaves is to convert sunlight into energy through photosynthesis.
But Hydnora have completely lost their ability to photosynthesize. Therefore, they have no use for leaves. They spend most of the time underground as a rhizome or stem.
Not one to conform, Hydnora also completely lacks roots and instead uses specialized projections called hystoria that worm their way into their host roots to suck up their nutrients, water, and minerals.
This vampiric behavior seems to perfectly complement their monster-like looks when they do eventually pop up on the surface. Hydnora are choosy about the plants that they latch onto, only slurping the life from the roots of members of the legume, spurge, and torchwood families.
The name Hydnora itself comes from the ancient Greek word hydnon, which means truffle, a fitting name for a fungi-looking plant that spends most of its life hidden underground.
Because they have no leaves or roots, researchers have struggled since their first description to classify Hydnora. Initially, these plants were lumped into the Rafflesia genus.
If you follow the channel, you'll recognize this one as the genus that contains Rafflesia arnoldii, aka the corpse flower, another holoparasite that takes the prize for the largest individual flower in the world.
More recent genetic sequencing, however, has placed Hydnora squarely in the Aristolochiaceae, or birthwort family. Most of the species of this family are tropical woody vines, so it makes sense that without the genetic information about these plants, researchers struggled to make the connection.
Hydnora and their closest relatives are, in fact, magnoliids, some of the earliest diverging lineages of flowering plants. This makes Hydnora one of the most basal parasitic plants we've ever discovered.
So while we know that Hydnora acts like a monster underground by sucking the life from its host plant, what's even stranger is what it does after the rains when it finally pops up to the surface to reproduce. Its reproductive style is described as brood site mimicry with imprisonment.
The fleshy flowers of Hydnora emit a stink from structures called osmophores that is similar to rotting flesh that insect pollinators, specifically beetles, simply cannot resist. To make sure the stink goes as far as possible, some Hydnora species are even able to heat themselves up slightly in a process called thermogenesis.
Imagine an aromatherapy oil diffuser, but filled with rotting flesh instead of lavender. Once their insect pollinators catch a whiff, they find their way inside the flower, and this is where the imprisonment part comes in. The beetles will feed on the osmophores until they fall deeper into the plant onto its anthers and become dusted in pollen. Then they'll fall even deeper still onto the cushion-like stigma, thereby pollinating the flower. When trapped inside the Hydnora, the pollinators are free to move around, but can't escape due to the high slippery walls and the cage-like bristles that edge the petals. Once their job is done, the Hydnora's petals will open up and the beetle is free to move on to the next Hydnora. This unique catch and release strategy helps to ensure the further survival of the species. Once the flower withers, the ovary turns into a large swollen fruit containing thousands of tiny black seeds that the local jackals and other small mammals go wild for.
The Afrikaans name for Hydnora is actually jakalskos, which means jackal food. The outer layer of the fruit is thick and leathery, but inside it's white, starchy, mealy, and very sweet, sometimes being described as having the texture of a potato.
The fruit of Hydnora are also used as traditional food for humans, which makes sense because they sound kind of delicious. Of course, after the corpse stink has cleared.
The fruit, rhizomes, and flowers of this plant are also used in traditional medicine to treat kidney, bladder, stomach, and throat conditions, as well as bacterial infections and menstrual problems.
They're used as an antidiarrheal and to treat a myriad of diseases like cholera, typhoid, and even cancer. The high level of tannins in Hydnora make it super astringent, which may explain why it's used traditionally to treat so many gastrointestinal conditions.
Although Hydnora was first described 250 years ago, we still know surprisingly little about these plants. The fact that they spend most of their lives hidden underground makes them extremely hard to study. We don't know much either about germination or seedling development.
The fact that they've proven almost impossible to cultivate in a lab environment makes it even harder to learn more about these plants.
Despite being elusive, they aren't endangered and are fairly common, lurking just under the soil of their native habitat.
While people claim that Hydnora is the strangest plant in the world, like so many other things branded weird, the lack of research into these plants proves that they're probably just wildly misunderstood. Once we're able to learn more about them, they may just be dubbed the world's most extraordinary plant.
Go outside on the hottest day of summer and you'll see dogs, cats, squirrels, bears, hares, marmots, and pretty much any other mammal doing this. It's called splooting. Yes, that's now an accepted scientific term for the adorable way animals spread their legs out.
It's this summer's coolest trend. This viral behavior, sometimes also called frogging or pancaking, is more than a shameless call for attention. For many animals who don't sweat, this is one of the most efficient ways to cool down.
Splooting helps animals thermoregulate by cooling down their bellies. The water content of the soil keeps it cooler than the air, and on very warm days, it can be up to 5 degrees colder. This is why you might catch your dog digging a hole in the garden to sit in. It's science.
Domestic animals and park critters might get all the attention for this behavior. But while making this show, we've seen lots of wild animals splooting away the heat. From Tasmanian devils trying to beat the heat down under and taking a break from the rough and tumble life of being the island's apex predator. Would you believe that these scrappy little guys behind me are actually Tasmania's largest predator? To massive dog towns of prairie dogs in the prairies, keeping watch of their colonies and scanning for coyotes while they let the grasslands absorb their body heat. To 2 of the greatest predators on Earth, who on an unseasonably warm day decided to come chill right next to us.
Oh my gosh, it's just a bear sploot. I see my cat do this at home, but seeing the largest carnivoran in the world do the same pose is just mind-blowing. That was one of the best days of my life.
Researchers believe that splooting not only helps the animals cool down, but also helps them stretch their backs and relax their muscles.
It's the animal version of self-care, like having a cold drink in a pool on a sunny day, except the pool is made of dirt.
Animals with short legs have a much easier time, which is why you see tree-climbing animals like squirrels and diggers like marmots and small dog breeds do it more often. Animals with long legs like giraffes and maned wolves also love a lay down on the ground to cool down, but they do it in much less hilarious ways.
It's also important to know that some dogs and cats begin splooting more often when they're in pain. So if you notice your pet adorably laying down like this more than usual, keep an eye on it.
Splooting is one of the many ways nature has to lower animal temperatures. Sweating is the main method that you're most familiar with.
There are special kinds of sweat glands under your arms and in other parts of your skin. These glands have little ducts to carry the sweat or perspiration to the outside air.
When humans, other primates, and other mammals like horses and hippos overheat, sweat glands release liquid to the surface of the skin. These droplets then evaporate, absorbing heat from your body and dissipating it into the air. Kangaroos don't sweat, but they lick or spit into their own arms for the same reason. But they're a lot more gross about it.
It's a similar strategy to what vultures do. They poo on their legs and wait for it to evaporate. You know, being sweaty is pretty awesome in comparison.
A lot of other animals who can't sweat pant instead. Panting, not to be confused with pantsing, works by accelerating the evaporation rate of the humidity in the animal's respiratory tract. Dogs will also stick their tongue out while panting to help cool down even further. In the case of saigas, their nose and respiratory passages are so wide that they can easily avoid overheating during the scorching Central Asian steppe summers.
It's kinda like sweating, but it only happens in the mouth and throat. In any case, the main idea remains the same. Turn your body heat into hot liquids and let them evaporate. Some animals push this even further by bringing in external objects to cool down. The most effective of them? Mud.
Oh, my poor little pig! I'm a-comin', Jenny.
Pigs get a bit of a bad rep for loving bathing in mud, but mud is one of the most efficient ways to cool down. Mud dissipates heat even faster than sweat, and for mammals on the heavier side, it's a gift from nature.
Oh my God, buddy. What have you done? Gus. Oh my God.
Oh.
You are filthy, buddy.
Large mammals have a smaller body surface relative to body mass, so it's harder for them to stay cool. Pigs, elephants, rhinos, hippos, water buffaloes, and tapirs are all known for loving mud. We actually got to see a wild tapir enjoying a refreshing mud bath in Costa Rica, fully unbothered by us. The power of mud.
And on top of helping them beat the heat, it helps them fight off parasites. But if you don't want to get messy, a drier way of losing body heat is through your ears.
Ears are full of veins and arteries that play a big role in thermoregulation. Elephants, hares, and many desert animals like fennec foxes, jerboas, and jackrabbits have massive ears. When the animal is hot, blood is pushed to the ears, which are very thin and provide lots of surface area for the heat to dissipate. On the other hand, animals that live in colder temperatures tend to have little ears and are shaped as spherically as possible to prevent heat from escaping their bodies.
Birds don't have external ears, yet, but the soft skin in their throat serves the same purpose.
Hot weather birds, like pelicans and frigate birds, do their own version of this through a process called gular fluttering. They shake their heads while sometimes inflating their bills. On the inside, the fast-moving air evaporates liquids, similar to dog panting. And on the outside, the hot throat tissue gets cooled down by the air.
You social animals like bees have to worry about keeping themselves cool and preventing beehive overheating. Air ventilation is key, so the workers do a cooling behavior called bearding.
Here's a bee that's in the ventilating system. It's waving its wings at the door of the hive to create a breeze in the hive. Now, it waves its wings about 200 times a second, and to cool the hive in summer. In winter, it will do waving of that kind inside the hive to develop heat, to keep the hive warm.
The bees exit the colony and arrange themselves in a beard-like formation while fanning their wings to help air circulate throughout the colony. This can be a scary sight, as it looks similar to when they're beginning to swarm. But in most cases, all they're doing is trying to stay cool.
Reptiles and other cold-blooded animals rely on the environment to keep themselves in the right temperature window. But one species in particular has developed their own version of a water cooling system.
The thorny devil lives in some of the hottest places in the world, the deserts of Australia. Water is scarce, but the thorny devil manages to absorb every possible drop of moisture thanks to specialized openings in its skin. Then it looks for burrows to stay away from the punishing southern sun.
Sometimes, the best way to stay cool is by not getting hot in the first place. Some animals in the Sahara have evolved strategies to stave off the heat.
The coolest of them is the Saharan silver ants. These ants sprint to prevent absorbing heat from the hot sand, which at times can get up to 50 degrees Celsius.
Their long legs move them at 0.8 meters per second, making them the fastest of over 12,000 known ant species. Every second, they travel 108 times their own body length. For you to do that, you'd have to run at about 700 kilometers an hour, just slightly slower than the average speed of an airplane.
On top of their speed, they're covered in hairs that reflect heat and can also dissipate heat in the air.
They're amazing creatures, but you kinda have to be to survive in a warming world. As the planet gets hotter, more animals will need to develop strategies to stay cool. Squids are the largest invertebrates in the world. There are hundreds of millions of them in the ocean, and yet we almost never see them. But why? What evolutionary tools do they have that make them so successful? And how have they managed to avoid us for thousands of years? These are the enigmatic giant squids. The kraken, the sea monk, the great sea serpent, and the great calamari are some of the names given to these enormous ocean creatures. We've been talking about these creatures for as long as sailors have been exploring the oceans. And yet for the vast majority of human existence, nobody had ever seen one alive. Because we didn't know any better, we assumed them to be monsters and gave them fantastical names like the Scylla in Greek mythology, the Lusca of the Caribbean, and of course, the Kraken of Norse mythology. Before modern times, all we had was mariners' tales and dead specimens found in the stomachs of whales or washed ashore on the beach. Most of the giant decapods found in Europe were likely Architeuthis dux, which is simply known as the giant squid. But there are two other enormous species that we should mention whenever we talk about the largest invertebrates in the world: the colossal squid and the big fin squid. But let's focus on the one that's fascinated seamen and beachgoers all over the world for millennia: the giant squid. Giant squids are absolutely massive. If you include the length of their tentacles, they can be up to 12 meters long and weigh over 250 kilograms. Their eyes, along with those of the colossal squid, are the largest in the animal kingdom at just under 30 centimeters in diameter. For context, a swordfish, which weighs the same as the giant squid and lives in similar habitats, has eyes about 10 centimeters wide in diameter, and human eyes are 2.4 centimeters wide on average. That is just way too much squid. A large female can be twice as long as a great white shark, and likely larger than a megalodon ever got.
They're also full-time carnivores, so there's no need to look for monsters in mythology books. Giants still roam the earth and the sea. And they roam a huge part of the world, having been found in temperate waters from Russia to Tasmania. They seem to not love the tropical seas, but they have been spotted in vacation hotspots like Florida and Hawaii. Wherever they go, they're always looking for their next meal. Giant squid catch their meals with 2 enormous tentacles, which can be up to 7 meters long, easily big enough to wrap them around ancient medieval fishing boats, which is where the legends probably come from. The tentacles are lined with dozens of hard, serrated suction cups controlled by muscles beneath them. These suckers dig into the prey's flesh and apply suction forces of up to 100 pounds per square inch. So in theory, they only need a couple of suckers to lift you. That's more than enough force to secure and hold their prey in place, while the squid rips it apart with its giant parrot-like beak. Their beak is bigger than your fist, and is only the first step of their meat processing operation. Inside their mouth, they have rasps that work as flesh graters. Once a living being goes in there, the V-shaped stream of light across the closing beak is the last thing it sees. These hunting tools also work as their only self-defense against their main predators, whales. But how do noodly appendages and an oversized parrot beak translate to battle with some of the largest animals to ever live? Well, not great. Even more than the beaches where they sometimes wash ashore, the stomach of a sperm whale is the most likely place you'll ever find a giant squid. These whales often have scars from the giant squid suckers. Their skin bears the marks of countless battles with these massive cephalopods. But size is usually the deciding factor, and whales are the ocean's heavyweight champions. Sperm whales are so whale adapted to eating giant squids that their intestines produce a wax called ambergris to wrap squid beaks and protect their organs as these biological shears go through their digestive system. These waxy substances have a pungent, salty smell. They smell like they came out of a whale's butt. And yet, they're used in the perfume industry, and large blocks of it can go for over $1 million. And of course, because of this, there are professional ambergris hunters, in case you're thinking of a career change. So many giant squids are found inside sperm whale bellies. Scientists estimate that these marine mammals eat up to 100 million of them a year. These remains have provided scientists with most of the information we know about giant squids. The rest come from the beached squids, but these animals rot very quickly, and by the time they land on a beach, they've likely already been dead for a few days. So weirdly, the partially digested remains inside whales' stomachs are often more complete. There's also the live squids that people have been reporting for centuries. Giant squids maintain buoyancy through ammonium chloride in their system, and when they die, they float up to the surface, unlike most cephalopods. And this chemical also makes them taste like salty licorice, which is pretty gnarly. Sometimes, giant squids float up before they die, usually when they're very old, sick, or injured. And often, in this disoriented state, is when they reach their tentacles into boats. It's a very small window before it dies and rots, but it tracks with how giant squids live their life. They reach sexual maturity at just about 3 years of age, and have a life expectancy of just 5 years. That's it! They get that big in just 5 years. For comparison's sake, great white sharks become sexually mature at 20 years of age and live as long as an average human being. On top of that, females have been found with over 1 million eggs yet to be released. So they reproduce young and at a massive scale. This short generation length helps them adapt quickly to environmental changes and replenish populations year after year. And yet, despite their huge numbers, we almost never see them. This started changing at the start of the century. In 2002, the first picture of a confirmed live giant squid was taken in Japan. The cephalopod had gotten stranded on a shallow bay. The locals tried to secure it, but it died the next day.
2 years later, a baited camera caught a glimpse of a giant squid using its tentacles to grasp the bait ball. Since then, improvements in camera technology and an increased accessibility to submarines has led to videos like these. This was taken by NOAA in 2019. From a wall of darkness, you see a bouquet of arms approaching the camera. The squid examines it with its tentacles, and after realizing there's not much food to be had, it disappears into the bottom of the ocean. Videos keep popping up every once in a while, showing us the power and majesty of giant squids. But, mighty as they are, they only play second fiddle to the colossal squid. Colossal squids can be up to 700 kilograms, over twice as big as a giant squid. Even though their tentacles aren't as long as the giant squids, their eyes are slightly larger. In theory, they should be as famous as their cousins, but 2 reasons work against their popularity. They only live around Antarctica, and they seem to live at even deeper levels than the giant squid. Lastly, we have the big fin squid. In a family of alien-looking creatures, these are the weirdos of the bunch. And I know that's saying a lot. They're slightly smaller than the other 2 leviathans we mentioned earlier, but still get to lengths of up to 8 meters. They're so ghostly and ethereal that they only weigh 2 kilograms. Their arms seem to bend at elbows into noodle-like appendages that drift behind the animal. They've only been seen a couple of times, but one of them gave us one of the greatest squid observations of all time. In 2019, NOAA filmed one alive. It was about 3.5 meters long, and it was 750 meters deep. You can see its long arms, see-through mantle, and giant eyes. And despite its size, it looked so fragile and tender.
Oh gosh. Look how cool.
No, it's just so...
It's a big fin squid, maybe?
Ghostly.
Magnapina?
Magnapina?
Oh man, look at him.
And there you have it, the fantastic world of giant squids. And the coolest thing is that we keep learning more and more about them. Next time we make a video about these gigantic creatures, there will be a whole new batch of discoveries about them. Orcas are unrelenting underwater predators, as smart as they are vicious. With no predators to keep them in check, these massive dolphins have free run, or more accurately, free swim of the oceans. There is only one species that won't take that kind of bravado without a fight. This is orcas versus humpbacks. Orcas, also known as killer whales, are technically the largest dolphin species. Their power and coordinated pack hunting is unmatched. Even the fearsome great white shark can fall prey to a hungry orca. If you're so terrifying you have jaws looking over its dorsal fin, you know you've found a true killer. Much like other dolphins, orcas live in tight-knit pods. Part of orca society is working together to hunt. And hunt they do. Orcas are exceptionally skilled hunters, employing all kinds of specially developed tactics to increase their chances of a kill. And because of their intelligence and close bonds, orca hunting techniques are passed down from generation to generation, ensuring that every new orca that is born into the group can use these highly honed tactics down the line. The only sea creature that has been documented to disrupt an orca hunt is the humpback whale, and humpbacks love to mess with these apex killers whenever they get the chance. One theory among researchers is that orcas have been known to hunt the calves of humpback whales. So whenever a humpback sees orcas trying to hunt, they'll get in the middle to prevent the orca from making a successful kill. Just a little marine FU to the orcas. There have even been documented cases of single humpbacks pursuing and attacking whole pods of orcas. Sometimes these epic underwater melees can last for hours, full of breaching, intimidating tail slams, and loud vocalizations. The relative size of the humpbacks makes this a terrifying battle indeed. A small adult humpback is 4 times the weight of the largest orca. That's about the size difference of a human compared to a grizzly. So you can see how more times than not, the humpbacks send the orcas packing. Orcas are the only natural predator of humpback whales, so the beef, or blubber in this case, is personal. Because of their size, humpback adults are rarely a target for orcas. Rather, it's their young that are their coveted prey. Humpback whale calves are covered in nutrient-rich blubber, so they make a hearty meal for a pod of orcas. The only way to successfully hunt a baby humpback is to separate it from its mother, because these mama whales are extremely protective of their young. She'll shield the baby with her flippers, or even put it on her back to keep it away from the circling orcas. Often, other humpbacks will join the fight, trying to protect the baby by running off the orcas. The killer whales use a coordinated attack to separate mother and calf. Once the humpback mother is no longer there to save it, they'll exhaust and finally drown the calf. They'll sometimes do this by grabbing the whale's flippers and flipping it over so it can't escape, all while holding it underwater. Valiant, a humpback that frequents the Salish Sea between Canada's British Columbia and America's Washington state, is known for its aggressive behavior towards orcas. One possible explanation is the rake marks made by orca teeth that Valiant bears, likely from when it was just a calf. Perhaps the memory of that early attack drives it and its brethren towards revenge as adults. Despite the obvious animosity between these two species, there has been at least one recorded incident of orcas actually helping a humpback. In Western Australia, a pod of orcas was seen helping to free a humpback from a rope it had become entangled in. It's unclear if they were truly trying to help the humpback, but they certainly didn't attack it while it was all tied up. Other than humpbacks, killer whales have been known to hunt other species of whales as well, like minke, fin, ray, and beaked, to name a few.
They often gang up on their prey, taking turns to bite and hold it underwater in order to tire it out and eventually drown it. Once it's incapacitated, the all-you-can-eat blubber buffet starts.
But they don't just go after species in their own order of cetacea. They'll even attack and kill cousins in their own dolphin family. Killer whales have been known to hunt down and chow down on many different species of dolphins around the planet. While they are harder to catch due to their speed, dolphins make as good a snack as any for these hungry opportunists.
The strategy is the same as with baby whales. Dolphins are bitten and held just below the surface in a brutal display of strength and ruthlessness. A couple of orcas can send a whole pod of dolphins in a mad scramble for safety.
To avoid creating drag while opening their mouths underwater and slowing down mid-pursuit, killer whales will ram the dolphin from below, sending it flying through the air. The stunned dolphin then becomes much easier to snap up. While they prey on lots of other mammals, like seals, sea lions, penguins, and porpoises, as well as fish from salmon all the way up to great white sharks, nothing preys on orcas. Great whites are so afraid of orcas that they are known to immediately leave the area if a pod of orcas splashes up. In particularly brutal fashion, orcas will often attack from below, flipping the great white over so it can no longer swim. Then, they swiftly snatch the nutrient-rich liver right out and leave the rest of its carcass for fish food. So why, if orcas are such brutal killers, do they not attack humans? After all the kidnapping and captivity, the hunting and the pollution of their habitat, why don't orcas pick off beachgoers like popcorn from a bag? Despite giving them every reason to hate us, there has never been a documented kill of a human by an orca in the wild. Even after all the reports of orcas capsizing boats on the coast of Spain and Portugal, the passengers who took unwilling swims were left completely unharmed. One explanation could point to their diets. Orcas commonly prefer foods that are suited to their nutritional needs and their environment. While killer whales in the Antarctic down penguins and blubber-rich seals, orcas off the North American Northern Pacific coast eat almost exclusively salmon to fuel their bodies. The answer as to why killer whales don't eat people could be as simple as, we don't look delicious to them. We might be too skinny compared to sumptuously fat marine mammals. Let's hope they never get a taste for humans, because as we know now, they'll pass that gruesome knowledge down for generations to come. Forget fennec foxes and hedgehogs. Move over, quokkas. There's a new viral squee taking over the internet, and her name is Moo Dang. Tiny, shiny, and as round as a Christmas ham. She's even blushing pink from being so dang cute. And don't mess with her, because her cousins on the other side of the tracks are some of the most aggressive behemoths in the world. These are the hippopotamuses. Hippos are some of the coolest, weirdest, and most dangerous animals in Africa. They kill as many people as crocodiles each year. Yet, when they're babies, they're so adorable we can't help but fall in love with them. Today, only 2 species of hippos exist: the massive river hippo, aka the Nile hippo, and the fun-sized pygmy hippo, Moo Dang's kind. Though they differ greatly in size, hippos are so strange that nothing else could be mistaken for them. They look almost prehistoric and essentially unique. There's no other animal you could see walking down the street and think, oh yeah, that's a hippo. They're iconic. Both hippo species have rotund bodies, broad grinning mouths, whiskery snouts, and tusks that grow throughout their lives. And they both have special adaptations for water, like the ability to close their ears and nostrils underwater and stay submerged for up to 5 minutes at a time. So yes, let's take this chance to see a baby pygmy hippo in the water. Aww! Hey everyone, we have exciting news! We're thrilled to announce the release of Animalogic's very first book, Strange Creatures. This book dives into the most incredible animals we've ever featured on the show, with each chapter packed with my illustrations and stunning full-color images. It's a fun and engaging way to learn about the animal kingdom, and a perfect tool to spark kids' interest in science. Each chapter breaks down an animal's biology, behavior, and all the coolest facts you need to know about these fascinating creatures. Animalogic's Strange Creatures is a must-have addition to your own library, or the perfect gift for an animal lover this upcoming holiday season. Click the link in the description to check it out, and if you can, order a copy. It would mean the world. Thank you so much, and I hope that you love the book. Pygmy hippos prefer thick jungle and spend less time in water than river hippos, but we'll get into that a bit later. One of the first things that you notice when you see a hippo is that they seem to glimmer. Babies even seem to have an adorably glossy finish. The radiant glow makes it look like they're wearing makeup, but it's actually just good old sunscreen. Hippos produce their own sunscreen-like secretions to protect themselves from the sun's rays. This oily fluid is called blood sweat due to its color. This secretion protects their skin from the sun and from infections thanks to its antibacterial properties. Sadly, for all of us pygmy hippo appreciators, they're mostly active at night, which makes you wonder why they need so much sunscreen in the first place. Hippos, both giant and pygmy, are nocturnal. During the day, they stay cool in water, or in the pygmy hippo's case, hide in dense thickets, away from the dehydrating heat of the sun. At night, these herbivores emerge to graze on aquatic plants, grasses, fruits, and other vegetation. Hippos also have a quirky habit of marking territory with their poop, creating what's known as a dung shower. They use their tails like sprinklers to scatter their dung, an excellent way to spread your chemical markers in all directions. But while both hippo species mark their territories this way, common hippos take protecting their turf to the extreme. Because of this, they're the deadliest land animals in Africa.
Common hippos are fiercely protective of their dung-marked land. And I'm not just talking about Pablo Escobar's invasive Colombian cocaine hippos. They attack anything they view as a threat, whether it's a lion, crocodile, or even a person. This territoriality has made them the largest invasive species in the world, as they have spread along large parts of the Magdalena River of Colombia. The river hippos were imported by Escobar for his private zoo, but once he was captured and his zoo fell into disrepair, the hippos escaped into the nearby river system. Having no natural predators and enjoying a lush waterway with no dry season, the hippos multiplied quickly. This affected the local ecosystem as they crushed the soil and destroyed fish spawning areas. The Colombian government is currently dealing with them. If you want to learn more about them, click on the link at the end of the episode. Their actions are necessary because hippos can be deadly. In Africa, they cause an estimated 500 human fatalities each year. While they may look clumsy and cumbersome, hippos are actually built to kill. They have extremely sharp tusks that can reach over half a meter long, and the bite strength behind those teeth is 3 times that of a lion. They are also 3 times faster than the average human, not just in the water, but also on land. Outswimming or outrunning a raging hippo is simply not an option. To their credit, common hippos will give you ample warning that they are angry about your existence. They'll open their enormous jaws super wide, displaying their mouth daggers. They'll also make head scoops, grunts, and aggressive splashes in the water to warn any threat that they are dead serious about an attack. Unlike pygmies, common hippos live in large family groups called herds, consisting of around 10 to 20 constantly changing individuals. It's not unheard of for groups to balloon to as many as 150 members. Within these groups, clashes frequently break out, sometimes with lethal consequences. By contrast, pygmy hippos, like docile little Mudang, live a quiet existence alone or in pairs. If another pygmy hippo happens to cross their path, observations show that they are generally unbothered. Unlike their hyper-belligerent cousins, pygmy hippos are so reclusive and elusive that they're nearly impossible to observe in the wild. Much of what we know about them comes from zoo studies. What we do know is that their reclusive existence in the forest means that they are vulnerable to human threats, like logging. There are other key differences between these two hippo species. A lot can happen in 4 million years, which is about how long ago these two species diverged. The most obvious is, of course, that common hippos, the second largest land animal after elephants, can weigh over 2,500 kilograms, whereas pygmies weigh just about 200 kilograms. To put that in perspective with another giant land animal, a large male river hippo is about the equivalent of 6 male polar bears. And a pygmy hippo is about the size of 1-year-old baby polar bear. The size difference is a classic example of island dwarfism. The pygmy hippos live in the mainland, but their habitat is a small forest surrounded by ocean and savannas unfit for their lifestyle. Food can be hard to find at certain times of the year, and the forest might not provide all the nutrition that larger hippos need. And finally, large animals tend to have trouble keeping cool. River hippos deal with this by staying underwater most of the day, but in the rainforest, they'd struggle not to overheat. When looking at their features, common hippos' eyes, ears, and nostrils are on the top to enable them to lounge submerged in water, while pygmies have rounder heads with eyes set on the side. Common hippos have stubby legs and webbed feet, while pygmies have longer legs and separated toes featuring sharp nails. While they are technically also terrestrial, common hippos spend most of their time in lakes and slow-moving rivers. Almost 80% of their lives are spent bobbing around. One theory as to how they became so enormous is that their massive weight is buoyed by the water, therefore allowing them to get larger and larger over time. By contrast, pygmy hippos spend most of their time on land, which could be why they've remained much smaller than their humongous cousins. The more slender legs of the pygmy hippo allow them to nimbly navigate the forest floor. The differences between these two hippo species raises an interesting question. Did their habitats shape their traits, or did their traits shape where they live? It's one of those classic chicken or egg scenarios. Thanks to her internet fame, Mu Dang has helped shine a light on conservation for these endangered pygmy hippos. This aquatic wonder can be best described as completely unbothered. It takes its time, gliding leisurely through the waves and occasionally even sunbathing on the surface. Predators can tear chunks out of it, and it just keeps on keeping on. It doesn't even have a bone to pick with the fact that its status as biggest bony fish has been recently toppled by a close relative. This is the sunfish. The ocean sunfish, otherwise known as the mola mola, is the second largest bony fish in the seas. But coming in second doesn't mean that the species isn't preposterously massive. Sunfishes can easily reach a ton in weight, but the heaviest on record was over 2 tons and was an almost perfect circle at 3.3 meters in diameter. Yup, it's round as a silver dollar, but about 100 times bigger, as heavy as a large giraffe. Until recently, the sunfish was believed to be the absolute biggest bony fish in the world. That record was upset by the discovery of a specimen of Mola alexandrini, also known as the bumphead sunfish, which weighed more than 2,700 kilograms. Along with ocean sunfish, this species is one of the 5 extant species of the Mollidae family. It makes sense that the word mola comes from the Latin for millstone, which perfectly describes these mega-heavy, disc-like fish. Despite looking like a bunch of ancient artifacts, this group is actually among the youngest in the ocean. They made their grand appearance in the seas about 50 million years later than most other modern fish. Sunfish are known for their iconic derpy appearance. They have bulging heads, big, vacant eyes, and 4 beak-like teeth that can't quite meet, giving them the look of a forever mouth breather. But the teeth that really matter for the sunfish are in their pharyngeal jaws, located in their throats. Pharyngeal teeth have evolved independently in many species of bony fish and are used for food capture and separating wanted from unwanted food. In the case of the sunfish, their pharyngeal teeth are used to trap and swallow the jellyfish that make up a large portion of their diet. Whatever particles the sunfish doesn't want to eat are then jetted out of its mouth. It can also use this jet force to defend itself from predators and even propel itself to make a super slow escape. Being large doesn't always mean you're slow in the animal kingdom. If you don't believe me, just try and outrun a hippo. But in the case of this underwater giant, the sunfish's enormous size does really make it seem like it's swimming through molasses. Its top speed is a breakneck 3 kilometers an hour. Unlike other fish, but have tails formed from the caudal fin that acts like a propeller to push the fish through the water, sunfish have a pseudotail that steers more like a rudder. Called the clavus, this pseudotail doesn't grow alongside the rest of the fish, which gives the sunfish its round shape. To propel itself through the water, the sunfish flaps its exaggerated back and belly fins like wings. This is similar to the flapping motion of these same fins in its cousins, the puffer and porcupine fish. Sunfish can be found lolling about the globe in tropical and temperate waters, though they can tolerate temperatures as low as 2 degrees Celsius. So in theory, they could be anywhere, other than the Arctic and Antarctic oceans. If they get chilly, sunfish simply float to the surface, lay on their sides, and soak up some rays. If you didn't pick up on it by now, that's why they are nicknamed sunfish. Laying on their sides on the surface actually serves more than one purpose. Their big, slimy bodies can be home to over 40 types of parasites. So by floating on the surface, they invite seabirds to snack on the creepy crawlies that cover their skin. To prevent their eyes from being plucked out by indiscriminate seagulls, the sunfish is equipped with a specialized muscle that allows them to pull their eyes deep inside their sockets. When being groomed by overzealous seabirds, some of the flesh will inevitably come away with the parasite. But that doesn't seem to bother the sunfish too much at all. Apparently, they aren't even too fussed when predators take a bigger bite either. 'Tis but a scratch. Their large size and very thick skin keeps most would-be predators at bay, but sunfish are still occasionally preyed upon by sharks, orcas, and sea lions. When they tire of their twisted little games, the sea lions will abandon the sunfish to sink to the bottom and die. Mammals! Why are we always such jerks? It may come as no surprise that one of the greatest threats to adult sunfish is another mammal, Homo sapiens. Boat propellers and rudders can easily kill a floating mola, and drift gill nets can damage their skin and protective mucus layer and fill their gills with air. Plastic bags, too, are especially dangerous for molas because the floating bag can be mistaken for a delicious jellyfish. Once ingested, the bag can easily choke the mola or clog its stomach, preventing it from being able to eat. Despite the fact that these surface-loving giants are easy to spot, the research on sunfish isn't actually that extensive. We don't know, for example, how fast they grow or how long they live in the wild. Because they live out in the vast open ocean, we're also still trying to grasp the size of their populations around the world and even where they spawn. We do know that females will lay up to 300 million eggs every breeding season. The babies start their lives as tiny larvae less than half a centimeter in size. But how they manage to survive to the behemoths we find gliding through the ocean is still an alluring mystery. So what should we talk about next? Please let me know in the comments and don't forget to subscribe for new episodes every week. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you later.
In the world about us today, there are about 500,000 species of animals. Most of these were domesticated by man before history began.
It took thousands of years to tame them, but these animals returned to their wild ways in a hot minute. This is the other side of domestication. These are the feral animals. Hi, I'm Danielle Dufault, and you're watching Animalogic Second Nature. We've talked before on the channel about the domestication of animals, but what happens when domesticated animals rewild themselves?
There are about 50 species of animals that have been domesticated